is June 23rd, and I'm Jessica Clark, the Teresa Mack Fellow, or Teresa Mack Germans from Russia History Fellow and Coordinator for the Germans from Russia Oral History Project. It is a pleasure to visit with Emil Schaffer in Gackle, North Dakota. To start, can you state your full name for the record?
Emil Schaffer.
And when were you born?
April 2nd, 1917.
I was born April 7th.
Yep.
And where were you born?
In a sod house south of Streeter in Logan County on the farm.
Is the sod house still standing, or is it since?
No, it's gone.
Do you remember, did your parents ever share any stories about your birth with you? Like, did a midwife come to help, or?
Yes. Yes, and it was 30 below, my mother said.
Oh my goodness. So do you know how they kept you warm after you were born?
I don't know. I didn't feel it.
Too young to remember it.
Yeah.
What is your earliest memory? What's the first thing you remember from your childhood?
Well, something that, should I say, an accident I seen? Okay, I was 5 years old and I was sitting on a coaster. And they used to have all these horses parked across the street from where we lived. And one of these horses' teams got loose and they started running down the street. About 4 blocks down, a man run out to stop him, and they run right over him and killed him right there. And that thing has never gone out of my mind.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Did you know who he was? Was he a friend of the family, or?
No, he was from town here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Rudolph Fody was his name.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess that could impact a child.
Yeah.
Oh. On your biography form, you're one of 4 children. What's the order of your brothers and sisters? Who was the oldest? You're the oldest?
No, my sister was 3 years older than I.
Okay, and what was her name?
Magdalena.
Magdalena, and then there's you.
Yep.
And then who's next?
My sister Hulda.
And how much younger than you is she?
She's born in 1922.
1922.
I never asked the age. I asked, when were you born?
And you were born in 1917.
Yes.
So that would be 5 years younger.
Yes.
And then you have a
And
younger
Lloyd
brother.
was born in 33.
33, so he's quite a bit younger than
Yeah.
you. Thinking back, what was it like growing up on the prairies? What was the prairies like for you when you were growing up?
Well, you know, I lived in town all my life, so it wasn't, but I worked out in the farm every year. Those days they had what they called a header. You maybe don't know what a header is. Mm-hmm. It's just an elevator. You cut the grain, the elevator goes up into the box.
Okay.
And I, at 10 years old, was the horse driver with the box. See? And we got 50 cents a day, early in the morning, late at night.
Huh.
And that.
Was it on a friend's farm, or?
Well, no, I just worked out to whoever. Most of the time I stayed 5 years. I worked at the Schlenker farm or my uncle's place or something like that.
Okay. Thinking back to the environment in the Gackle area, and something that I've noticed is like the rolly green hills. It's very hilly out here. What did you find that was really beautiful about the area?
Well, you know, there's been so much change in my life. There were very few sloughs around, and now there are lakes and lakes around, you know. And those days you had a lot of wildflowers. We found there were wild tiger lilies, you know, were grown. Yeah, we had tiger lilies and all kinds of flowers. And they're not here anymore because they broke up that land.
That would have been real pretty to see.
I had a guy from Tacoma, Washington, come out here one time, and he said his mother lived south of Gackle, went to school in Finn Township. So I told him I know where it is. So I took him out there, showed him where the schoolhouse isn't there anymore, but he took pictures. On the way back, he says to me, "Can I ask you a question?" And it might be foolish. I said, "No, that's all right." He said, "What's prairie?" He said, "My mother and my aunt always talked about the North Dakota prairies." So I took them over to a hill south of Gackle there, and I showed them something, I told him what the prairies. Once you break up the land, it's not the prairies anymore. So he was real happy. He said, now I know what the prairies are.
Oh. Well, yeah, coming from the West, I don't think you really have an understanding of what it is until you get out here. What were the winter months like when you were growing up?
A lot of snow. We had some winters that roads was blocked. Trains were stuck out here 10 days at one time, and just all the snow you could the roads weren't good those days, they were poor roads, so yeah.
I imagine they were kind of like the worst gravel roads you could find that are still around. That was your best road.
Yeah, that's right. We drove up to number 10 to get on gravel. That's the only place you could drive on gravel.
What were the summer months like?
Hot. The ones that I remember is 33, 34. One time in 1934, right on Main Street, we broke an egg, and it didn't get hard, but it took a shape. That's how hot the sidewalk was. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! So kind of like it is going to be today and yesterday, or worse than that.
I'll have to tell you about when I was 10 years old. Some of my jobs for about 4 or 5 years ago. Everybody had a cow in Gackle, or maybe even two. So I would start on that end of town, and I'd pick up the cows 6 o'clock in the morning, take them out to the pasture north of Gackle, and 6 o'clock in the evening take them home. And I got a penny a day for each cow. And one year I had 28 cows.
Oh my goodness. Oh my.
Then another one of those high price deals was 30, he's laughing, 30 wooden egg case, 30 dozen wooden egg cases. I don't know if you've ever seen them.
I don't think I have.
People would have. There are 32 sections. Okay. They had 15 in this section and 15 in this section. And these boxes would all come knocked down. Then you'd have a frame that you'd put the ends in and the middle in, and then you put one board on, nail it, flip it over, and nail on the other board. And I got a penny a box. And I usually did, nail 10, 15 after school. One day I was going to see how many I could nail, and I nailed 100 of them, and that was $1 a day. Now that was a price,
Oh my goodness. And how old were you when you were doing this?
I was doing it for the store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because on Saturday night, Rebel store, I said, we cackle for Gackle, the egg town.
Was this when you were a young boy?
8, 9 years, 10 years old, yeah.
So you've been working.
Yeah, up to 12. When I was in the 8th grade, I worked in the store, hauling the groceries in. And those days I'd get a list in the morning saying, so many cans of this I want and so many cans of that. I'd go out in the shed and bring it in. It wasn't self-service like it is today.
Yeah.
And I'd get 50 cents. Everything went by 50 cents those days. My grandchildren don't believe it, but
let's see here. What was the population of Gackle back then?
more than we have today. Yeah, it was right around 500 all. The most ever was 604 at one time.
Okay.
Yeah, and now it's only 348.
Well, smaller than it used to be, but bigger than a lot of the small towns around here.
Yeah, but we've got 90 more homes than we had in 1950.
Really? So more homes, are they just abandoned now, or?
Well, we had 93 homes, and every 2 years I take my own census.
Okay.
We had 93 houses where only one person lived in.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And then we used to have families that had 7, 8, 9 kids. Now you got 1 or 2.
Are you seeing that it's more of the older people that are still in the town versus the younger generations?
The older people, most of them are gone. Herbert and I are the only ones left yet.
Going back to the seasons, what was your favorite season when you were a kid? Would you like
June. School went out.
Did you
But I always had a job all my life. I never was without. I never asked my dad for a penny spending money. I always made my own money. Yep.
Do your brothers and sisters have their own jobs as well?
Well, my brother, he always had a job, but he was a little, how would you say, he could fix anything. I wasn't that type of a guy.
He was like a handyman?
Yeah, he could build anything up, just. And my sister, well, she got married, and then she moved to Valley City. They had the college grocery at Valley City. Yeah.
So, with your brothers and sisters, you said the oldest one died when you were a child.
She was 9 years old, yes,
9 years old.
Third grade.
Do you remember when she got sick?
Yeah,
What
because,
was that like for you?
well, when you're a kid, you don't know much. Just remember the doctor coming, and he gave her castor oil, old miracle, and then they found out she had ruptured appendix. And the only thing I remember about that, we loaded her in the morning in the train, and we went all the way to Fargo, and I can still hear that. Have you ridden on a train?
Mm-hmm.
Bumpity, bumpity, bump, all the way to Fargo. We got into the Fargo hospital, and about 10 o'clock. We left here at 10 o'clock in the morning. We were in Fargo on the train 10 o'clock in the evening. And by 12 o'clock, she had passed away. Yeah.
Do you remember the funeral? Did your family have a
No, that's
funeral?
something that just slipped my mind. I don't even remember going to the funeral. All I can remember is the casket sitting on the bathtub. Those days you didn't have funeral homes.
Yeah.
So my dad put boards on there and put the casket on there.
Huh. And then your younger sister, where is she at now? What is
She lives in Valley City now.
In Valley City?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What did she end up doing throughout her life?
She doesn't do anything. She taught school. She went to school, yeah. Mm-hmm. And her husband taught school, yeah.
Okay. How about your younger brother? What's he up to?
He's retired, and he lives in Arizona now.
In Arizona?
Yeah.
Ooh, living the high life.
Yeah.
Well, what did he do during his life?
Well,
Before he retired?
we had the bottle gas business here in Gackle
Okay.
together. And then he was a plumber. He worked for the plumbing outfit and for Reinhardt's out of Fargo. So he was always doing something.
Kept up his handyman
Yeah.
skills. Thinking back to your grandparents, do you remember your mother's your mother's parents?
Oh, very well. She was my favorite grandma.
Really? What was your grandmother's name?
Rosina.
Rosina?
Rose, they'll call him, yeah.
And what was your grandfather's name?
Sam.
Sam. Did they live close to you when you were growing up?
No, they lived over south of Streeter, yes. About 12 miles. But I spent a lot of summers out there with them, yeah.
Did you go out to help them? Were they farmers? Or
No. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't help. No, because their son was a year younger than I. So he didn't call me uncle, so I didn't call him in German. They got a name, Ihr,
Okay.
when you're older.
Yep,
See,
the formal.
and he didn't say that to me, so I didn't call him an uncle.
Oh, okay. You said that your grandma Rosina was your favorite grandmother. Why
Yeah.
was she your favorite grandmother?
Well, because when I come, she made what I liked. And my other grandmother was just opposite. She made what she had on the table.
So what did you like when you went over to your grandmother Rosina's house? What would she make for you?
Well, what do you call them? Schupfnudler,
Okay.
pigs in the blankets.
Those are good.
Yeah. There's a lot of other things. Can't think of them right now, but
Okay.
always had something good.
If you think back to your grandmother Rosina, how would you describe her as a person?
Very pleasing. I always being around, and always trying to help out.
How about your grandfather Sam? What was he like?
Well, he was a little different. But he liked me. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but when I went over there, I always bought him spark plug. You don't know what that is. It's chewing tobacco in a little package like that. It only cost a nickel. And Grandma wouldn't let him chew it. So when I brought it, he always told me to come down to the barn. He would hide it in the barn. And their house used to have a base, a rough basement. And I and Art, this is their youngest son, we'd go out and herd cattle. And then we would go down to the coffee grinder. They had a coffee grinder. We'd grind coffee in Montgomery Ward paper and take it along out there. And then we would smoke coffee.
Oh my goodness. I have never heard of anybody smoking coffee before.
And I never smoked in my life, but we smoked there as kids. You always have to try something. Yeah.
What types of things would you do when you would go out to your grandparents? What types of things would you do when you visited them?
Well, most of the time we had to herd cattle those days.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to. That was we'd be out there in the field all day long or on the pasture because there was no pasture. See, there was just prairie, so you just take the cattle out to the field and and they would never give us a horse. When he was alone, he'd get a horse, but when I got there, they'd never give us a horse.
So when you went out there, would you stay the night out there?
Oh yeah, I stayed there sometime a week at a time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How many children did your grandparents have?
13. Yeah.
And your grandparents came from Russia, directly over
Yes, they were both born in South Russia.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know
My mother was born in Odessa.
Okay. Do you know how your grandparents met each other and got married?
No, I don't know.
How old was your mother when your grandparents moved over here?
They came here at 9. My mother born in 96, so she would have been about 13, 14 years old, yeah.
Did she remember the journey over here?
Mm-mm.
Not really. Was your mother the oldest child?
Yes,
or
I think so. I don't know.
Okay.
There's a few of them died in Russia. They might have been older, but my mother had 4 sisters.
Did they all live over here?
No, when they came over, there was only there was 3 boys, and 3 girls when they come.
Okay.
Yeah, and 3 of them were born over there that died over there, or 2 of them, or 3 of them. Yeah,
Okay.
2 of them. And one of them got killed by lightning. And here.
They were struck by lightning here.
There's a storm. Well, they had these farm telephones, and she was sitting by on a telephone, and the lightning came in and killed her.
Oh my goodness.
She was about, maybe 7, 8 years old, something like that.
Huh. So 13 kids.
Yeah.
Were you close to your aunts and uncles then?
No. No. Yes, well, you should say Art, but I didn't call him an uncle.
Yeah, he was more your age, so more of a buddy
Yeah,
than
that's right. And that's why we went more to this grandmother. Now, my grandmother on the other side, they were just opposite. Like Grandpa Schaffer, he was strict like this. And I used to go over there, I had to clean out the well. They had a well by the house, and you'd let you down. Pretty soon there's too much sand would come in there. So once a year, you'd have to clean that out. So he would let me down in a pail, and then I would clean all that sand out. Then when the water started coming out, they pull you up again.
Oh my goodness. That would be kind of scary.
Well, they didn't come in that fast, they were hand, yeah, and the well wasn't that because it was a hand-dug well,
Okay,
yeah.
so it wasn't.
Yeah. And then I'd go in, and for dinner, I'd always tell my dad would take me over there to clean it out, and I said, make sure you come back here after dinner and get me, because when you got dinner, you only got what Grandma had got out of the garden or what she made herself.
What would be something she would usually make for you?
She wouldn't make anything for me.
Not anything?
I never forget tomatoes I didn't care for, She canned tomatoes. Everything, those days, everything was canned. Mm-hmm. Maybe if she had sausage, she would bring it out, but not very seldom, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
How would you describe your Grandma Schaffer? What was she like?
Well, she was a nice lady, yes. And Grandpa was real strict. I have to tell you about Grandpa. Every time they'd come to visit us, Then Lloyd wasn't born yet, but anyway, he would give my sister a nickel and me a dime. And one day my dad says, well, Emil only spends a nickel out of it. The other nickel he puts, we had those little safes, you know, from the bank. He puts a nickel away. He said, give me that dime back, he said in German. I thought, no, I'm not going to get anything. He took the dime back and gave me a quarter. And he said, but 15 cents has to go in the safe.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I gained on it. Yeah.
Scared you though, you thought you were going to lose on it.
But you know, you couldn't, he wasn't a person you could sit down and talk to.
Okay.
Just, yeah.
Was your other grandfather, was your grandfather
Oh yes, oh yes, yeah. My sister didn't like him because he had a mustache, and he'd always kiss her, and this was
itchy. How close did your grandma and grandpa Schaffer live to Gackle? Did they live in Gackle, or were they?
No, they lived right in Streeter.
Oh, they did live in Streeter. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, they homesteaded south of Streeter, right about where I was born.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That house, that sod house is still there.
Where is
and I always thought it's south of Streeter at the Herbley farm.
We're going to have to drive by there, see if we can.
Well, if you see where it says Schaffer Cemetery, okay, that's the second farm. The house is still there. And I always thought it was a sod house, and we just went there this year. And it's really, it's a sod house, but it's made out of mud, you know. Like our house was made out of pieces of sod.
Yeah.
Well, this looks like it's all mud, just like cement. You must have mixed up in the box.
See, what we need to do is
that house is still sitting there. You can even take a picture. We walked inside it and all.
Really?
Yeah.
No, what we need to do is we need to convince him to do a follow-up interview and take him over there. Get him to talk about the house, show us. And
I never was in that house.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I can't remember ever going to when my grandparents lived there. Then after my grandparents moved to Streeter, see, that was when I must have been 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Okay. And then John Schaffer moved on it, the son. And they lived on it. And now Herbley owns it.
And it's still standing. It's almost unheard of, too, to see those still standing.
You know, it's surprising how they lived, you know. Dirt floors and...
Yeah, it's amazing.
Now in our house, my dad had a wooden floor put in the house.
Okay.
But the walls were kind of plastered with clay, mud sometimes. And then it was papered. And the windows the window walls were that thick, you know, you could sit in them.
Really?
But it was a warm house in the wintertime and cool in the summer. Yeah.
Ideal. We can't keep our house cool or warm for the life of us.
Yeah.
How many children did your grandma and grandpa Schaffer have?
Let's see. 4 boys and 3 girls.
Were they all born in, your dad was born in Eureka,
Yeah.
South Dakota.
Only 2 were born in Russia, yeah.
Okay.
The 2 oldest ones.
Were you close to any of your aunts and uncles on that side of the family?
No, I gave them all to my sister. I won't say any more now.
Thinking back to your mom, how would you describe your mom?
Well, how would you describe your mom?
How would I describe
She was wonderful. No, I mean, she was wonderful to me. Yeah. One thing about my parents, they were very religious. Yep. Okay. We got up in the morning, we had our breakfast. Well, first they done the milking and stuff, then we come in to have breakfast. And we were done eating breakfast. Then we moved back. Dad would get the Bible out. We would sing one verse of a song, and then my dad would read a scripture, and then we had to kneel and pray.
Really?
So we done that every morning, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what your favorite verse was when you were a kid? Did you have a favorite?
No, I went to confirmation school. We had so many of them.
How about a scripture? Did you have a favorite scripture that you really enjoyed? Well,
not a favorite one, no. I had just every one of them. You know, my worst part was I went to confirmation school and everything was German. Now when I talk English, I have to think German, you know, but I'm getting away from it pretty.
So,
Because in our house, we never talked English at all. My dad always said, "Das ist ein deutsches Haus, da sprechen wir Deutsch." See? Then when I got married to Lillian, she was Finnish.
really?
And Hulda got married to Fred, he was Bohemian, so the Deutsch went out.
So did your dad and mom know how to speak English? They just wanted to
Oh,
speak
yes.
German in the home?
They even learned, you know, talk about education now. My dad only went 3 years to school.
Okay.
And he bought cream, and he could spell people's names. The only thing, he spelled it in German, like enough. E-N-U-F, not O-U. I told him it. He said, "Das ist verrückt." But they could, and my mother too. She only had us, you know, they went out to work. My mother said the minute she was old enough, because there were so many girls there, see.
Yeah.
So they would go out, and somebody had a baby, they had to go over to the neighbors and help them out.
What was your mother's name?
Clara.
Clara? What was her maiden name? Do you remember?
Schultes.
Okay.
Now some people pronounce it Schultes,
Okay.
but it's just the way you want to say Schultes.
Okay.
S-C-H-U-L-T-E-S.
T-E-S. Okay. Okay. And she was born, you said she was born in Odessa?
Yes.
Okay. How old was she when she passed away?
90 years and 1 month. 90 years. Then she had a sister that died later. The next sister to her, Mrs. Sinker, was 90 and 3 months. Then she had another sister that died. She was 90 and 9 months. And now her last sister just died. About a year ago, she was 92.
Oh my goodness.
And the brothers all died of heart attack. Except one was a wino. He lived to be 85. But Art, the one I'm talking about, he died at 44.
From a heart attack?
Yeah, just stood up and fell over. And then the oldest brother, he never woke up one morning, 60. And then the other brother was 61, I think, and he had a heart attack too.
Fairly young.
Yeah. So I always say I'm going on one side of the women, so I'm getting older, not on the men's side.
That's a good thing. Let's see here. How did was your mom an affectionate person? Did she show a lot of emotion to the children?
Yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. And
she
not only that, she even, when we done something wrong, she was very emotional. She told my dad about it.
So if you had to say who was stricter in
Yeah.
your house, it was your dad?
Well, my dad was this kind of a guy. Never bothered him, but if he said something, you know, I can remember one time that, well, when you didn't sit in church quiet, you know, or you'll get it. Well, then we got company, so I didn't get nothing. But 2 days later, why, he said, "Come here once," laid you over the chair and let you have one on the cedar.
So it could be postponed.
Yes. Well, I couldn't do that. I have to do it when I'm mad. One time my sister and I were arguing, and then my dad got mad because he's tired listening, so he hit me. I don't know what happened. Then my mother said, "Well, that wasn't his fault. That was Hulda's fault." He sat a while and he said, "Well, then maybe that's for the time that he should have got it, that he didn't get it."
So did your dad have a good sense of humor then, would you say?
Very. He had always in his mind that taught me, if you can't say something good about somebody, then don't say anything. And if you don't like someplace or like somebody, stay away from them. And he said, you'll never get in trouble. And my dad never had, that I knew of, ever had trouble with anybody. Yeah.
What was your dad's name?
Jacob.
Jacob?
Yeah.
And he was born in Eureka. How old was he when he passed away?
Dad was, he died of stomach cancer. well, he was almost 72. He died in November. In January, he'd have been 72.
Was he an affectionate person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What type? You mentioned that your dad, when he was a farmer originally.
Yeah.
And then he moved into Gackle and he opened a cream.
Start buying cream. Yeah.
Started buying cream. Did he do that the rest of his life, or are there other types of jobs that he did?
No, later on he was. Well, they moved to Jamestown. He worked in the grocery store. Then he moved back to Gackle. He was a trucker. So he bought a truck. So all he was doing is trucking.
Okay. And your mom, she took care of the house and the children?
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in the dirty 30s?
Well, I was lucky, like I said before. I always had a job, where a lot of the guys just didn't have a job even. I never needed any spending money. And we always had food. We always never starved, never bad. Always. We weren't rich. My dad wasn't rich, but we had a good life.
Were your parents ever out of work when you were growing up? Was your dad ever out of a job? Were times that times got hard or anything, or did he
No.
always just?
Mm-mm.
We've talked a little bit about your brothers and sisters. How would you describe do you remember your older sister?
Not much.
Not
no.
much? Okay.
No.
How would you describe your younger sister? What was she like?
Well, she was a sister that we always argued about.
Were you close to her when you were growing up?
Never close, no. Mm-mm.
How about your brother? How would you describe him?
Well, he came along as a trailer, I was already 16 years old when he came, so. Oh, but we liked him, took him all over, and yeah.
Do you remember either of your younger siblings' births? When they were born? Excuse me. Do you remember when they were born?
Yeah, I remember the morning Lloyd was born. That's the only one.
What was that like?
Well,
Excuse me.
Then I was old enough to know everything about it, see? And we had these little ventilators in the house where we lived, to get the heat up. Mm-hmm. And we would listen down there.
Oh.
Then pretty soon Dad would come and say, it's time to go to school. They went to school. Well, when we come home, here was the baby.
What was it like for you having a little guy?
Well, to me, I never cared for them until they're old enough that I can have fun with them, yeah.
To walk, talk, and cause mischief. How did you get along with your brothers and sisters when you were younger?
Oh, we always got around good, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get in any type of mischief with your brothers and sisters?
No. I was always a good boy.
Pleased everybody?
Well, I never broke any windows or anything. Like a lot of mischief. We done a lot of things, with slingshots or something, but we never broke anything. Just
had fun.
Yeah.
Were you ever left home alone? Did your parents ever leave you in charge of your brother and sister? You had to take care of them?
No. Mm-mm. We never had that.
Let's see here. Out of your brother and sister, who would you say you were closest to during your childhood?
Well, I would say my sister.
Your sister?
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking back to your family house in Gackle, what did it look like? Was it a smaller house, larger house? How many rooms?
It was, you had 2 bedrooms upstairs.
Okay.
And we had the front room, and the dining room, and the kitchen, and then we had a bathroom. We had a bathtub in there, but no running water.
Really?
Yeah, and, right along in the bathtub, in the bathroom, there was a great big cistern. if you know what that is.
Yep.
Okay, and there was a pump right alongside of the bathtub. So if you wanted to take a bath, you heated the water and you could pump the cold water in from here, and then the water went out. Yeah, I think at one time the man that built that, they had a big well outside with a tank up top, and I think they were going to put running water in there, but the man moved away and we bought the house, or my dad bought the house.
Where was the house?
Right across the street from the hospital, or whatever you call it there.
Oh, the Gackel Care Center?
Yep.
Okay.
It's the second one from the corner.
Is it still the one?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you live there? You lived there your entire childhood?
I lived there until I got married, yeah, I'm 39.
Where did you sleep in the house? Did you sleep in how would you?
Well, to start out, when we were little kids, we just had a Davenport that you made into a bed. And that's where I slept, right in the front room. Then later on, after I was old enough, then you had to go upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had 2 bedrooms in the house? There were 2 bedrooms in the house?
Well, 3 bedrooms,
3
2 upstairs and 1 downstairs,
okay.
yeah.
So did your parents have the one that was downstairs?
Yes.
And then boys in one?
I wouldn't call it a room. It was a bed and a table. That's all that was those days.
Speaking of the furniture, what type of furniture was in the house? You have a Davenport. Did you have beds in the rooms?
We had a leathern Davenport,
Okay.
and in the front room we had, in German they say Schankbettlaut. Do you know what that is?
Is it like a closet type thing?
No,
Trunk?
it's a cabinet that makes into a bed.
Oh, okay.
Is that what you say?
Yep.
I can't talk German good enough. Schankbettlaut.
Yep.
Bedlaut.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's where they take down, and then that's where we slept. I mean, that's where I slept, yeah. Because that was the only 2 bedrooms downstairs. We didn't sleep upstairs when we were little kids, see.
Okay.
Then what reminds me of later on, we slept upstairs. I slept upstairs in one room, and the other room in the wintertime was closed up, cold.
Okay.
And when Christmas come along, we always bought, as long as you were talking from Washington, we bought delicious apples, wrapped, put them in there. No, did they smell good.
Yes, nice fresh apples smell.
And you know what we used with those wrappers, don't you remember? Took them out to the toilet. That soft paper. We had to save every one of them. You put it, when you're done taking the apple out, you put the paper down here, and then later on when the box was empty, you took all of them out to the toilet outside.
Oh my goodness. So how did your family keep the house warm in the winter?
We had a good furnace in there, yeah. Hot water furnace, yeah.
Okay.
When we moved in, I had a hole in the middle of the floor like this, one furnace. But a year after we were there, my dad put hot water in it.
Oh, okay.
And we had. Then years later, they even figured out a automatic, heating that would open the vent, close it, yeah. So
did the upstairs, the one room that you had open, did that stay pretty warm in the winter, or was it?
Oh yeah, with those registers open, they both had registers in there.
How would you keep food cold in the summer?
We didn't. In the 30s, you wouldn't believe, I may put a bed in the basement or damp. My dad and my mother slept on the floor. It was so hot.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 30s were real hot.
How did your mom manage to keep the house clean in the 30s?
Well, my mother was clean. Not only that, if you had a book laying here, if you moved it, she'd say, Emil, that book had to go back that way again.
Everything had its place.
Everything. Even when she was 22 years in the nursing home in Wishing.
Okay.
When you'd come in there, if you looked at something, you had to put it right back the way it was.
So how long did your parents live in the house that was over there?
Until 1945. They sold it and moved to Jamestown.
Okay.
Then they lived in Jamestown for a year. They had a chance to make money and sell the home. They moved to Medina. And then they were in Medina 4 years, and they moved back to Gackel again.
Where'd they live when they moved back?
2 houses north of the Catholic Church.
Okay. Did anybody in your family have a nickname when you were growing up?
Yes, me.
What was your nickname?
Schimmel.
Schimmel?
You know what a schimmel is? That's a white horse.
Oh.
I had freckles and white hair.
You had white hair when you were a kid?
Everybody had a nickname in Gackle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your brother and sister's nickname?
Well, they didn't have any. They came along later on.
Okay.
But we met in Arizona. Can you believe this? All of us, not the same class, but all the high school. We met Budge, Mush, Eggs, Bugs, and Schimmel, and Finn. And that's how they got their name. Mush was a Clifford Hallberg. His dad ran the elevator here.
Okay.
And he was real mushy with the girls, so he got the Mush name. And Eggs was in our boat. When we were Boy Scout, we walked out here about 2 miles, and then when we were done, we had a dozen eggs left, ready to go home.
And what was his name?
So Clemens Ruff.
Okay.
We fried those eggs, and he ate them all. That was Eggs from then on.
Oh my goodness.
And Bugs was Walter Hummel. He lived right next to us, and we grew up. When I came to Gackle, I was 3, and he was a year old. And the other one was Budge Rimbold. What he got that name, but I don't know. But that was until the day he died.
So did Herbert have a nickname when he was growing up?
No.
No? Just the gang of you guys there?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Who did what around the house when you were growing up? Who did the cooking and the cleaning and then gardening?
Oh, my mother done all that, but we had to wash the dishes. That was our job, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did your mother have a garden when you were growing up?
We had a big garden. It was all garden, in those days. You didn't have a lawn. We had a very little lawn, but the rest was all garden because most of it was potatoes. One big garden was potatoes. That's what most people had, potatoes around here.
What other types of things did your mother grow in the garden?
Well, she had everything. Peppers, we had peppers and beans and lettuce. I didn't eat lettuce, but they had lettuce,
Never liked lettuce?
No, I like lettuce, the other kind, but I don't like from the garden with vinegar. I don't care for that.
What other types of chores did you do around the house? Did you have any other types of responsibilities you had to do besides the dishes?
No, my job was take care of the barn. That's why I never got to be a basketball player, because after school it was my job to clean the barn, feed the cows. And I didn't do any milking. Mother and my dad done the milking all the time.
Where was the barn at? Was that?
That's right in the same place, yeah.
Place?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my mother, I have to tell you something, that's the old-fashioned kind yet. When cows got milk fever, you ever hear of that? Their bag swells up and they don't give any milk. So my mother, her mother could do it too, would close the barn door. What she done, we don't know to this day. In German they said brauche. Okay. She'd go in there, the next milking day the milk was there.
So your mother could do the...
Yeah, brauche. I don't know what she done, but that's what they called it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what I'm finding with the bracha is it's very secretive as far as what they do in there.
Yeah, we had an old lady by the name of Mrs. Suko, and Kermit Hummel had warts all over his hand, And they went to doctors and everything. He couldn't get rid of it. So he went to this. I went with him. We went to Grandma Sukat, and she took him in the room there, and whatever she done, brauche was what you called it, and came out. 2 weeks, the warts were all gone. And then he said, "What do I owe you?" And he said, "No, you got to put a nickel in your church every Sunday morning." That's all she wanted.
Huh. It's a good lesson behind that too for him.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What about your brothers and sisters? What type of chores did your brother and sister, what type of chores did they have to do? Did they help you with the barn, or did they have other types of responsibilities?
Well, see, I was gone by the time.
Lloyd.
Yeah. Lloyd came out, he was born at 33, and I got married in 39, And in 37, I didn't care because the girls were more important. I only had two girlfriends in my life.
Really?
Yep.
Your wife and...
Ella Wolf lived not north. Did you come down the Cleveland Road?
We came from Ashley today.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, when you go up the Cleveland Road, you go up that way. Mm-hmm. 3 miles north, you'll find Schaffer Lake. That's my land and my fishing lake here. And a mile north of that was my other girlfriend. Her name was Ella Wolf. Oh. And I don't know if you read it.
I read a little bit.
Okay, all right. I went out to see her, and she said, this is the wrong night. And I came back to town and found Lillian.
See, things work out in mysterious ways.
Yeah, it does.
How old were you when you met Lillian?
37.
37? So
not 37 years.
No, 37.
I was 20 years old then.
Old, yes.
I go by years, not by
years.
when you're born, yeah.
Let's see here. Did your father help around the house at all?
No.
Did he have any?
He done the milking. He milked it, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because our cream station was just where the hospital is today.
Really?
That's where right on the cream station was right there, so it was right across the street.
That had been nice.
Yeah.
Convenient to walk to work and. Okay. What chores did you especially dislike doing when you were growing up? Is there something you just hated to do that you had to do?
Well, when I helped on the farm making hay, that was the worst thing. You know, those days we done everything by hand. Now farmers don't do anything. Yeah. I can remember when I worked out there, we had this rake. I would rake it on a pile, and then two of us would go together, stick a fork in there, and then you had to throw it up on the hay rack. Then you'd take it home and you'd take the fork and throw the hay off. Then you'd haul it in the hay mound, and then you'd poke it down. And then after the cows ate it, then you would haul it out again. See, so everything was done by hand.
Imagine that it was...
That's why we didn't have to exercise like they do today. You got all the exercise.
You didn't need to go for a jog.
Yeah.
Imagine with you saying, though, that the summers were quite hot. That was quite a miserable time of year to be doing hay.
Yes, it was, yeah. I can remember one time sitting on a rake, and they had iron seats on there, and it was too hot, the seat to sit on. So I took, those days you didn't even have coolers. We had gallon jugs with burlap sacks tied around them, wet, to keep the water cool. So I took that and poured it on that seat and sat on it. And I had blisters the next day. So I learned fast.
Oh, no. You talked about that you were responsible for the barn and then for doing dishes.
Yeah.
Did your responsibilities change when the seasons changed? Did you have more chores to do in the winter or more things to do in the summer? Did they vary over the season?
Well, in the summertime, then I took care of the cows out by the pasture, see? And then most of the time I had a job. I would wash cars around town or something. I always had a job. I always had a car. I was the only guy that had a car around.
When did you get your first car?
Well, I was in the car business. This was my sales pitch. I used to work for a Chevrolet. Well, my first car that I bought a Model A for $135. But anyway, in 1935, I started working for the Chevrolet garage. So I drove Chevrolets. And then in 1940, about 45, 46, Roland Meidinger moved back from Lodi, California to Gackle, was a good friend of mine. Then he bought the Buick garage in Jamestown. Then I drove Buicks. I had 3 Buicks. And then in 1956, I had just bought a new Buick, and I found out that there were better cars. So I started selling them. Fords.
So you're a Ford man?
Yeah, I'm still driving them.
Do you remember who your neighbors were when you grew up?
Pardon?
Do you remember your neighbors when you were growing up? Who your neighbors
yes.
were?
Mm-hmm. In fact, I was telling you, Walter was a year old when we moved to Gackle. We met in Arizona. He was with the U.S. Army, the embassy, war and everything. And when he retired 14 miles from where we were down there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And he married a gal from Berlin.
Okay.
And but Walter died of a heart attack. So he's last year or two. I was there 2 years ago, and she's alone now. Yeah.
Were you was he your only neighbor? Did you only have one neighbor?
Oh no, I had Reuben Roof on the other side. He was my best man in the end. He was the guy with there, yeah.
Okay. When you were growing up, did your family ever go on like a family outing, like a picnic or?
No, my folks never.
Okay. What types of things did you do for fun as a child? What types of games did you play or activities would you do?
Well, let's see. We made our own games all the time.
Okay.
One of them was kick the tin can. Did you ever play that? Well, we didn't use a can. We used an old football or old basketball stuffed with hay, and you would kick it and everybody would hide. And then you had to go find them. And the other game was pig.
Okay.
That was with a tin can and the best sticks. And they had a bunch of holes around like that. And in the middle, if I was the pig, I had to keep that hole. And then they would try and hit that can out of there. And then whoever, you would try and steal somebody else's place over there. And the guy that didn't find a place, he had to be the pig, see? We made all our own. And then baseball, we played a little baseball. And see, right where the hospital was, where our cream station used to, was a big lot. And there was nothing but old machinery there. And that's where we played all those. There's buildings there. When it rained, we played in these old buildings all the time. But we made all our own entertainment. Horseshoe, another thing we played.
Like just the game, the horseshoe
game? Yeah,
game?
the horseshoe game, yeah.
Okay. What about some indoor games? Did you ever play like cards or board games or anything like that?
Yeah, in our house we couldn't play cards, but we played cards uptown, yeah. No, and my folks wouldn't let us play cards. Yeah.
Religion?
We played Chinese, no. What do they call it? It was a squeegee board or Chinese. You go around. Have you ever played that? You make our own, game. Then you'd shake dice and you could move so many.
Oh, like Chinese checkers type of thing? Or?
Well, it wasn't Chinese checkers. It was, because it was a deal just like this. And then you had some round places that if they had two of them on here you couldn't pass, then you had to go around. And the first guy that'd go around, Parcheesies or something like that.
Okay, I have heard of I've heard of
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I think that's what they called it. Well, that we could make up ourselves, see?
Okay.
We had dice and the rest, buttons is what we used most of the time.
Anything to have fun?
Yep, that's right.
We were just talking about an accident that you had. Now that we had the videotape of, you want to reshare the story with us?
Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you my mother always had deals that if she dreamt about a cistern, something was going to happen. And that morning before I left, she says to me, Emil, I dreamt of somebody in the cistern. Somebody fell in the cistern. Be careful. Well, that's all. So we went out, done the swatting. When we were all done, we were going to move off the field, and we had to move on a high grade. So we had to get up pretty high, and then the tractor lifted up in front. So I told my dad to stop, and we would pull it up with a chain, the swatter. And so he went and made a U-turn out in the field and come up this bank, and he got about halfway up, and I believe that he stepped on the brakes because the governor opened up and the tractor went straight up. If I'd have been strong enough to hold him, I could have maybe held the tractor, and it went over backwards on him. And then I got in my truck, jumped the ditch, faced toward the tractor, and hooked the chain on my truck and hooked the chain on the tractor wheel. And I got back as far as I could go, and then the truck started spinning. And then I went back, crawled on top of the tractor, and then my dad could talk. And I said, well, I can't get it up high enough, I said, but I'll let it down. I said, you take a good breath, and I see if I put that chain around the top of the tire, it gets more leverage, you know. So I let the tire down, and my dad would, oh, breath, you know, get it. Well, I run over there, hooked the chain on there, pulled it back, opened up that truck just as far as it could go, but the tractor got high enough, and there he crawled out. And then I set him in front of the radiator, and he was just all full of transmission grease. So I told him to stay there, don't move. In first place, he said to me, I'm going to put that in there too, he said, put his foot out, and he said, ich denk, der ist ab, und der Zebe ist fort. Cut the toe off, and the leg was broke. Well, I went to a farmer, and he was combining, and he wouldn't stop, so I stopped his combine, and then his name was Art Schlecht. Then he helped me get my dad on the truck, to lift him on the truck. Brought him to town, and we cut his clothes all off because they were all transmission grease. My wife called the Jamestown Hospital for the doctor, and we got him to Jamestown, and then he had I think he was in 6 weeks, and he had 3 ribs broke, toe cut off, and the leg broke here. And would you believe it? The year before, on the same day, he was working in Medina. Lloyd was working in the filling station, and he went over there to help him, and he put air in it. The International brought a truck tire over, and they had the wrong rim on there. He put air in that tire, and it blew up. It hit the ceiling up there and come down and cut him open here.
Oh my goodness.
Then he was 6 weeks in the hospital for that too.
Oh my goodness. That was an unlucky day for your father, apparently.
Well, yes, and the 25th is unlucky. He was born on the 25th, he died on the 25th.
Really?
Yeah, so the 25th was always unlucky for him. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But he had all the misfortune in the world. When we were the year we moved to Gackle, we went out to look at the cattle. I don't remember that because I was only 3 years old, but I heard it so many times I know it all by heart. Well, anyway, they went in and we had all the cattle in the pasture, my dad says, or my mother says. And they went in to look, and here was a bunch of heifers, and the bull was standing there. So my dad said he was, you know how a bull scratches, you know. He was going to reach down to pick up the rock to throw at the bull, and about that time the bull hit him one. But they were only maybe 300 yards from the fence, you know. So he told my mother to get out of the pasture because I and my sister were there with her. And he said she had to run way up to the gate, not crawl through the fence there. She had to run up the gate. And that bull would always go like that, he said, and his horns were backwards. And he said, I held a hold of him, and every time he went like this, I got back on my feet and I run. And they always give me a shove closer to the fence. And by golly, finally he made it out of the fence.
Oh my goodness.
Never got hurt. But he said he had a raincoat. It was kind of raining. And he had a raincoat, and you could just hear when the horns went by like that.
Oh my goodness.
But he had all that. He would never mind.
Oh my goodness. Thinking back to your childhood too, on a lighter subject, less interesting, but did you have any pets when you were growing up? Besides like dogs or cats or anything?
Well, not until I got married. No, we didn't have any, no. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, I should too. I raised rabbits when I was a little guy, yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. But they matured so fast, or whatever you call it. We had too many. We had to get rid of them. My grandparents had a lot of doves in flat over there. So one day, Grandpa caught 2 doves for me, and we put a ribbon around their legs, and I took them here. And about a month later, the pigeons were gone. They just disappeared. Came over to my grandparents. There they were, flying in the barn with those little ribbons on the legs, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So we no more pigeons. They were too dirty, you know, dirty all over.
So the rabbits, did you just raise them because you wanted to, or did you?
Yeah, just for the fun of it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When you were a child, did you participate in any organized sports like baseball or basketball or
No.
anything? How about, were you in any clubs? Like 4-H or anything like that?
No. Mm-mm.
Did your mom and dad tell you stories when you were growing up? Any stories that you remember?
You know, this is so disappointing we didn't talk enough. You know, now I'd like to talk about it, see, but it's too late now. That's why I'm writing all this up for my kids, see. See, my brother, or my dad had a brother that died. I think he must have had diabetes or something, because Dad says he remembers him having a handkerchief around his head all the time, you know, brightness. And he died. They don't know where they buried him. Grandpa Miller came in, made a box, took him out and buried him. So he's buried out where that sod house is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. How about, did your family have any like rhymes or sayings, little prayers or something that they would say regularly when you were growing up?
Well, my dad had the same prayer at every meeting.
Okay.
Kom Herr Jesus, sei unser Gast und segne diese Speise, uns zur Kraft und dir zum Preise.
And would he say that like every day? Like that was
Before we ate, every meal. Yep. Mm-hmm.
A nice family tradition.
And you know, it took me until maybe about 5 years ago till I figured it out. It's God, you know, come Lord Jesus, be our guest and bless this food to the nourishment of our body and to praise you. To praise and serve you, I guess, yeah.
Praise and serve, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
See, my dad, as far as public church was his. He was a Sunday school teacher all his life,
really?
yeah. But as far as political office or anything like that, see now, I had all the opportunities. I was mayor and I was fire chief and I was even justice of peace.
Really?
Can I tell you that story?
Yes, yeah. Please do.
Okay. First time I got to be justice of peace, about the first or second week, the cop from Gackle, the policeman, came in and said, Mr. Retzer, I'm not going to put his first name on there, okay. So called me a SOB, you know. And I said, well, do you want to swear out a warrant? Yes, I think you should be taught that. So, okay. He lived out in the country about 13 miles between here and Jamestown. So I wrote him a letter and I said, Tuesday night, I'm going to be at the city hall. You better come in. Said, Mr. Schlittenhardt has got a warrant here for you that you called him a SOB, and if you don't come, it's going to cost you a lot of money because we'll have to get the sheriff from Jamestown and the sheriff from Logan County because, you know, 2 different counties. Yeah. Be there at 8 o'clock. So, okay, we were there at 8 o'clock, and I think there was 3 other people and the policemen were there. Here he walks in. Hey, I'm here. Okay. I said, what do I do? I said, sit down. So I said, he said, well, what should I do now? Well, I said, here's Mr. Schlittenhardt said you called him an SOB. And, if you want a court hearing or if you want to say that you're guilty, yes, I called him that. He said, yeah. So, well, I said, then I have to fine you $10 and $2 cost. Good, where do I pay it? So, he gave me the $10 and the $2, and then he said, what do I do now? I said, you're done, you can go home. So he gets up, walks to the door, and turns around, and he said, I still think he's a son of a bitch.
A man of conviction.
Yeah. And then the people saying that, well, you should have called him back in and for contempt of court. I said, you can't find a man for thinking. He didn't say he called him that. He said, I think. So I had my first experience.
Oh, my goodness. Let's
My most interesting part of my life was being a legislator in Bismarck. I had 4 terms. You meet so many nice people. And would you believe the first year I was in the session, we had 109 fellas there, or women and fellas. And before we went home, my wife knew the name of every one of them.
Really?
She could call them by name. And I don't know them today yet.
She was good then with names, I take it.
Well, she was a school teacher for 20 years.
You have to be good with names.
Yeah.
So when you were in the legislature, did you live up in Bismarck, or did you still live in Gackle? And then...
No, we lived in Gackle, but we could rent. People would be happy to rent you their house. They would go to California for the winter, see? And you had a house. And my last 2 years, I was chairman of political sub. So I had a good job, yeah.
Thinking back to your childhood, were there any music or entertainment in your house when you were growing up? Did you play an instrument or?
Well, I took lessons. I'm not a good player, but I took a lesson, so I know notes. And I played a saxophone in high school. Yeah.
Do you still play?
No.
No.
I got that little organ out there. I still play that, yeah.
Still play the organ?
Well, because I sang in the choir since 1933.
Okay.
And when we moved to Arizona, I got in the choir down there right away, and this little organ, that's where I practiced my part.
When did you start playing the organ?
Well, I took lessons. I took 48 lessons. Okay. And the minute I could play a church song, my folks thought, that's good. Don't need any more. But my sister was a good player, yeah. She took lessons. Mm-hmm.
Let's see here.
Did you, as long as you have the interview, did you have those interviews years ago that I never forget, when somebody was buried out there? All the Germans would, we'd have all the internment, like they put the dirt in the Ossie or whatever you said, and then when the pallbearers start covering up, they would sing that song. Lass mich gehen. Did you hear that? Lass mich gehen, dass ich möge Jesum sehen. Meine Seele ist voll Verlangen, ihm auf ewig zu empfangen und vor seinem Thron zu stehen. And they were covering him up.
Really?
They'd all sing,
sing
that song. And then they would cry.
Huh.
See, now we got that. We don't have anything like that anymore.
Yeah. That's not...
But that's the way it was. And I can remember the first pallbearer I was, we let him down with ropes even.
Huh. Did you have to, something that somebody had mentioned before in an interview is that the pallbearers would actually dig the grave sites back then? Did you have to help dig the grave sites?
No, most of the time the neighbors. No, the pallbearers never. It was always the neighbors that dug them, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But you'd get, if you were a pallbearer, you had those ribbons on there, those black. Yeah, if you were a pallbearer, they always had like a ribbon here, tied on here. Autumn band or whatever they would call it.
What was a typical funeral? Like, what was your first funeral? Whose funeral was the first funeral you remember going to? You don't remember your sister's.
No, but the first pallbearer was in 1928. My friend Lloyd Tigan died, and I was pallbearer, and we let him down with the ropes. That's one thing I never forget.
How did he die?
He, pneumonia. He was washing a car, got cold, got sick. They were the drugstore people here.
So what did a traditional funeral consist of back then?
Well, they're not any different they are today, yeah. Mm-hmm. Everything pretty much the same, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just with the role of the pallbearers and the
Yeah.
song is a little...
But everything was German. There was nothing
Nothing in English.
Everything, our church was all German, yeah.
see here. You mentioned before that you went through confirmation in German. What did your confirmation classes consist of? How long did they last? And
One solid month.
one solid month.
Mm-hmm.
And what church did you?
At that time it was the Congregational Church. It's United Church of Christ now.
Okay.
And I knew the catechism, I memorized the catechism from the beginning to the end. Yeah. And then the second year, see, I went 2 years. Mama said he wasn't smart enough. But the first year I went in 1931, my folks on the Saturday, we were supposed to be confirmed on Sunday. My folks went to Canada to visit my dad's sister, and I wanted to go along. And old Pastor Meyer, he wouldn't confirm me. So I went the next year, but then I was more or less not a teacher, but I would ask the questions, and then they'd get them out there.
You could assist a little bit with it.
Yeah.
So what was expected of you for confirmation? Did you have to memorize the catechisms, or did?
Yes, and then, on the Sunday, we had, I think, 30-some people up there, and each one would have. Maybe you'd get 5 questions. The preacher would ask, Emil, what's this? Mm-hmm. We had one guy that could memorize, and he got one verse. Would you believe which verse it is? What's the shortest verse in the Bible?
I'm not sure.
Jesus wept. That's all that, yeah. The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept.
I didn't know
and
that.
They said, Edwin, I can't say it in German now, see, but then he said, hey, Jesus wept. Jesus weint.
Did you know what questions were going to be asked to you beforehand, or were they just random questions that you had?
No, we knew. You knew ahead of time. And because some people, like I, was loud and plain, so you'd get the ones that were, some people you couldn't make out.
You get the little long ones. Okay. During confirmation, was the pastor, how would you describe the pastor? Was he an approachable person or very strict, or?
Well, Meyer was the old-fashioned minister, strict, But we had trouble too. They just changed the telephones in Gackle. You guys don't know any of that. See, they had magnets in the old telephone when you had them on the wall and rang them. Well, they threw all those away, and some of us guys, not me, I never done him, but there was Emil Miller and some of the Schott boys. Elmer Schott's husband was one of them. He went there, confirmation school. So he went this fine wire over where the girls sat, Then you turn that little bit, they would just go like that. And they didn't give it the full work, and the girls didn't even know for 2 or 3 days. And then finally one day somebody must have hit it a little hard, and they all jumped. And then he called 3 guys by name. He said, I don't know if it was Joe or Johnny Schott, one of the 2 of them. And Emil Miller was another one, and he called him. He said, he wants whatever is there, take it off.
Anything to make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. For confirmation, how many people were there that Sunday to watch the...
Church is full. Yep.
Was it pretty... were you nervous to get up in front of that many people? Or?
Well, no, I never was, because as I grew up, all our Christmas pieces, we always got as 2 guys. Okay. His name was Manuel Clank and I. We were loud, and, so we had always, hello, Fritz, or something like that, So we were used to be up in front, and then... Okay. And that's when I start singing in the choir, right after confirmation, Mm-hmm.
With confirmation, after confirmation, did your parents have a celebration for you?
No, no.
Okay.
But the day of confirmation, like whoever stayed at our place, they had a big dinner at our house, whoever,
Okay.
We always had 4 or 5 kids stay at our place while the farmers would have them in there.
Oh, because you lived in
Yeah,
town.
because we went a full month. We June 1st to the June and 4 weeks.
What was a typical Sunday dinner like for the family after church? What would you have on it?
Chicken noodle soup. That was a Sunday dinner. And my mother she always made angel food cakes. 2 kinds. You know, a white one and a dark one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The yellow one, or I shouldn't say a dark one. Well, anyway, if there was a flop, that's the one we got. And today I like a cake that's got a flop, that's soggy.
Sounds similar to my grandfather. His
And
mother used to burn cookies.
Now, coming back to those days, can you imagine Thanksgiving? A lot of people, how we do it today. Mm-hmm. My folks, that was a butchering day. We would go over to my grandparents. They usually raised the hog or the beef. They'd spend all day long butchering. Then about 10 o'clock at night, before we would go home, then Grandpa would have to say, well, we'll have to taste that sausage. Then we'd have sausage before we'd go home. He used to mix it in a big wash tub, you know. I never forget that. You know, they'll tell you shouldn't eat meat raw. He'd mix this and he'd, a little more pepper, a little more garlic. That's the way he mixed it up.
So he had
and he lived to be 89 years old.
Huh. You mentioned Sunday school once that your dad was a Sunday school teacher. What was Sunday school like for you?
Well, you learned everything in German. We even learned to write. You know, like we would write our Sunday school lesson. Okay. Yeah.
So was your dad your Sunday school teacher, or did you?
He was the superintendent. See,
okay.
We had your own teacher because those days you had pews and your teacher would sit in this end and you'd sit in the pews that way. See,
okay.
We didn't have different rooms like we have now.
Okay. How far was the church from your house?
Well, the church is down that same street.
Okay.
Second house from the end. Okay. The church parsonage is there now. They moved that church away when we built this new one. Okay. You know where the new church is now?
I do
yeah.
Where that one is now.
See, we built that in 47.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you remember when the church switched to English services?
Mostly when we built a new church, yeah.
When you built the new church?
Yeah.
What was that like? Was that a hard transition to do?
No, they still had their German Sunday school, you know, and everything. And, yeah.
Did the church have a problem or have difficulties keeping the same pastor for very long, or did you have the same?
Well, they called it 7-year itch.
Okay.
You stayed 7 years, and then it's time to go. Most of them that way, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but 7 years is a pretty good time for some of the small towns. You see it every year they're changing.
Yeah, in 41, we got a young pastor in here by the name of Walter Kranzler. He's still alive. He was Lillian's funeral. He came here as a single man. We started up a quartet. We sang in the quartet. And then in 57, he quit preaching and he went in the lumber business. And Reverend Bettenhouse came. So we had another preacher. So we had the quartet. So we had every Sunday morning we sang in the church, yeah.
So do you still sing in the church choir?
Pardon?
Do you still sing in the church choir?
Well, we don't have nobody anymore here.
Oh,
every once in a while I still do, yes. Okay. The last song we sang, On Eagle's Wings.
Really?
Yeah. But you know, we only have just a few of them, nobody in church anymore. We used to be the biggest, what would you call it, attendance church in Gackle. And the last Sunday morning when I went, there was about 31 of them there is all.
Really?
Yeah, they have to close up. You know, the Catholic Church just closed up now.
Yeah, that's what I heard about.
Yeah, and Assembly of God's going to have to close up too. Yeah. So it's just one of those things, just like with farms.
Yeah.
You know, one day I put flowers down on a cemetery south of town for a guy in Arizona. So I drove out west of town, 2 miles, drove south 10 miles, drove east 10 miles, came up north where I met Lillian the first time, and came in here on 46. And there are 41 farms that were there are not there anymore.
Really?
Yeah. Can you see what happens to the small towns? Churches and all.
And the schools too. Then
Yeah.
I mean, streeter kids are having to come to Gackle for high school now.
Well, you know, used to the front row, about 8, 9 pews in our church here were filled with Sunday school kids. Then when they went to, everybody went downstairs then, and it's not that way anymore. And then I went to Arizona, and that's different. Then I come back, this is a disappointment now. Yeah. See, there we had a 40-member choir, and you know, it's all old people. Yeah. They had one baptism in that church in all the years that we were there. One guy was in the army, and he belonged to that church, so he had the baby baptized. Otherwise, they're all old people, yeah.
Thinking to the holidays, what was your favorite holiday when you were growing up?
Christmas.
And how did your family celebrate Christmas?
Well, we always had Christmas Eve at there, you know. But then, you know, those days weren't like today. You'd have like Easter too. I don't know if you had it when we were little kids. You'd get a cap. We didn't even have a basket. We'd use my dad's cap, and then I would try and look for some bigger cap so I'd get more. Get up in the morning and then everything. And then Easter, you'd always get that bag, and that's when we come home. That was the fun part. Cracker Jack, you remember? Those days, now Cracker Jack doesn't mean nothing to me. Or like oranges or something. We never had that. We got apples and stuff like that.
Did you have a Christmas tree?
Oh yes, always a Christmas tree out. In fact, we even always had it here later on every evening.
How would you decorate your Christmas tree during a childhood? What would you use for decorations?
Well, a lot of times popcorn strings. You'd have to get your popcorn ready and make that. But my mother had, you know, a lot of things that she made. Okay. She did a lot of knitting and sewing and stuff like that, so she had all these little ornaments on there.
What about gifts? What type would you get gifts for Christmas? And if so, what was that like?
Oh yes. You know, whatever, we got what you needed. You didn't get gifts. Let's see. I maybe needed a new pair of pants. I can remember the first Easter that I got a long pants. You know, we had these short ones all the time. Okay. And we walked all the way from our house to that church down there. In those days, they had these picket fences, you know, wooden things on there. And I was looking down at those long pants, and I run into one of those picket fences, and oh boy, I thought I tore my pants, but I didn't. Oh. Never forget that.
The heart sinks, and you're
yeah.
like, ah. What was Christmas dinner like? What would you have for a Christmas dinner?
Nothing special, no,
Special?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I would say if Grandma brought a goose over, give us a goose, they would make a goose for dinner or something, you know. Yeah.
So did your grandparents come over to celebrate Christmas then?
No. Those winter days, you didn't go any place. Okay. No, but when they butchered in the fall, Grandma always raised a lot of geese and they had guinea hens. You know what a guinea hen is?
I actually, for the first time, saw them 2 weeks ago.
Well, you know why they didn't eat those? They just used them so a chicken hawk would fly by. They made so much noise so the chickens would go in the barn and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they raised them for. My grandparents had a gander, and the first time I got over there, if you've ever been attacked by a gander, boy, did he get me black and blue. So my grandpa said, next time you do that, here's what you do. And he showed me. He came up there, you know. He grabbed him by the neck and swung him around, went round and round, and let him fly out there. So I tried it, and that happened once, and the gander never touched me after that.
Really? Just got to show him who's boss.
But you know what amazes me more, like my mother would make coffee cakes, 15 on a Saturday. We didn't have a refrigerator or anything. How did they keep them? like my grandmother out in the farm, they had a well right close to the house, and they had sometimes the binder twine would bear. There it goes. Not get the butter with her. You know, they'd hang everything in the well.
Yeah, to keep it.
But your coffee cakes, you know,
Wow.
she made every kind. That's whatever she'd get hold. You'd have raisins and peaches and prunes and every kind she would make. But she had to make a special one for my dad all the time.
Really?
He wanted nothing on but a little sugar on top and a little cinnamon. Then he would use butter. And she'd always say, it would be a lot cheaper if you were all like Dad.
When you think about your mom and your dad, how would you describe them as a married couple? Did they have a good marriage?
Not because it's my folks. I never heard my dad say a bad word or ever bawl my mother out. Yeah. But my mother, I would say, what do you call it? Run at the mouth once in a while. And then he would say, Clara, then it'd be all over with. Now, my dad never had an argument. My mother and dad never had an argument that I know. See, and the guy I was baptized was Pastor Nagel. He was the first Lutheran minister that started all these churches around here.
Oh.
And he confirmed my mother too.
Really?
Yeah. And my dad's family was Reformed church.
Okay.
So when we got to Gackle, they didn't have a big Lutheran church, a little one. And so that's why we went to Congregational church. And Dad said he more or less went because the first day he was in Gackle, he walked uptown and a man came along. And they started talking to each other, and pretty soon he introduced himself as Reverend Schrader. And then he asked Dad where he's going to church. So Dad said, well, that the wife was Lutheran, and but we don't know, we don't like this Lutheran church. And he said, why don't you come to our church, So Dad went the next morning, and he said they just welcomed him in. That's the way it was.
Switched over to
Yeah.
It's nice to have a welcoming.
Yeah. Well, that's what I say is the difference. Like Arizona is the same way. Man, I'll tell you, that's when we joined that church, that pastor was there in the morning, and all the new people, they always met the new people, The old people came late all the time. I mean, not the old people, but the old members.
The old members, yeah.
Yeah.
The ones that were.
But that's why we joined that church down there.
So, how about 4th of July? How was 4th of July celebrated?
That was, when we were young, watermelons and pop. Mostly in one year, I'll have to tell you, we were going to be good. We were going to make pop for 4th of July. So we got it all bottled and everything. And about a week before 4th of July, all of a sudden, poof, heard some noise. What happened now? But he's doing another one. So he's laughing. He knows what I talk about. She must have put too much yeast in or something, and every one of them popped. We had no pop. We had to go buy the pop. But just before July, they have big truckloads come in from South Dakota with melons. And my dad had some kind of a deal. He would go and snap, and he could pick out a good ripe one all the time. Then we'd have to take it and cool it,
Huh. How would you cool it?
Well, they had an ice house in town.
Okay.
Yeah. Not an ice house, but the butcher shop cut ice, and then we'd go and get ice from there and put them in there.
So what types of things would be going on in town for 4th of July? Would there be...
Oh, they had races and everything, yeah.
Okay.
Horse races and everything. In my days, one time, the Advent Church said the world was going to come to an end. So out north of town, they blew up some dynamite about the time they said the world was going to come to an end.
Oh, my goodness. So, with the foot races and stuff, did you participate in them?
Pardon?
The foot races, did you participate in them?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Were you a good racer?
Well, sometimes and sometimes. Bike races, well, I usually won.
Oh.
I always had a bicycle, yeah. Running, I wasn't too much, but bicycle, because I had a bicycle all the time. I even went to Streeter and back on the bicycle already, so. And I had one of the fanciest ones, you know.
Yeah.
I and the banker's son. Well, this wasn't, I didn't buy it new, but the lumberyard man bought his son this bicycle, you know. It had the toolbox on, the light on, and the horn on, and the carrier and back, and everything on it. And that kid took the bicycle out when he shouldn't have and fell down and broke his arm. So the man just sent the bicycle. $35, you can have it. So I went home and I had $35 and bought the bicycle. So I always had the fancy bicycle.
So is that, how old were you when you bought the bicycle? What year was that?
Well, 8, 9 years old.
So is that how you did your paper
Yeah.
route?
Yeah. Well, I went to get the cows.
You'd actually mentioned earlier that you delivered the Sunday paper.
St. Paul Pioneer Press, that's still in circulation, if you noticed.
Yep. And you delivered it on a, you say Thursday?
Thursday it was a Sunday paper, but we got it Thursday night.
How much did you earn doing
10
that
cents
job?
a paper. Sold for a quarter, yeah. And my first sale, when I got it, I sold it to a guy. He was a guy from out in the country. Morlock was his name. I forget his first name. And, you know, I went up there. He went like that, you know, and give me my quarter and went. And he bought it just for the funny papers. Those days you had Jigs and everybody else in the funny papers, you know. So the next week the same way again. Finally I came home and told my dad, I said, that's funny. That guy, either he's drunk or something. And Dad says, he's deaf and dumb. Yeah, and I didn't know it. But he could write. See, he was 6 years old and he got fever, what do you call it? The bad fever,
Like
and he
scarlet
lost his
fever?
scarlet fever, yes, and he lost his hearing and his talking.
Oh, okay.
So then they sent him to the school at deaf and dumb school. And he write, right? And later on he moved to town here. But that was so funny. Why he didn't talk?
What, 10 years old, you know, you kind of raises an eye to you.
Yeah. But it's kind of funny getting the Sunday paper on a, yeah.
On a Thursday?
Yeah, now I get it 7 o'clock in the morning here.
How about birthdays? Did your family celebrate birthdays?
Well, not so much. I had my first birthday in the first grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you celebrate that?
Well, we made homemade ice cream. My mother would always make homemade ice cream. That's all you had to work. Cake and homemade ice cream, that's all you had to have. In fact, when we got to Bismarck, that's what Lillian always. We made ice cream up there, you know, bought the cream here. Everybody I talked to today out there still alive. Oh, Lillian's cinnamon rolls and ice cream. I'll have to tell you, that's another story about cinnamon rolls. Lillian could make cinnamon rolls, just you couldn't find anybody making that. So when she got sick, I decided one morning, I said, Lillian, let's make cinnamon rolls. Put her in the wheelchair, put her out there. Got all the ingredients out. She told me what to do and put them in there and everything. Put them in the oven. And got done, they weren't, I made bread pudding out of them. They didn't get any higher than that. So then Lillian said, well, maybe the yeast was no good. So we waited about, maybe a month later. Let's try cinnamon rolls again. So, okay, done it, got new yeast, got everything. Went back out, done the same thing. That one maybe got that high. And then I finally decided that it takes Lillian's hands to make the cinnamon rolls. Telling me didn't do any good. So I don't make no more cinnamon rolls. I make pigs in the blankets, and I make Schupfnudler. You know what they are? Dumplings.
What are they?
Dumplings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I put sausage in the bottom, and then I put potatoes and onions with them, and then I put, you know, I buy the bread, bought frozen bread, and cut it. And didn't you ever have dumplings?
Well, I've had dumplings. I just
Well, this is pretty much like it, yeah.
I had pheasant dumplings. That's something that we've eaten before.
Well, then I I cook the sausage a little bit and the potatoes. Then I put them in the electric deal, and then I lay you have to cut the bread and put them in rolls, you know, like that, about like that. and then I leave them raise so they get a little fluffy.
Okay.
About 2-3 hours. Then I lay them around on top of the sausage and all this, and cover the pan up. You know, it steams then
Yummy.
for about 35-40 minutes. And you look them, there they are, full sausage and all. I made some for the kids the other day here. They ate that whole pan full.
So who taught you how to cook?
Well, Lillian was a good cook, yeah,
Lillian.
no. Well, and you know, Lillian was teaching school, so I was always at noon, but I just learned since Lillian got sick.
Yeah.
I just remember what she done, you know. And
You had mentioned before, what did Lillian get sick with?
Lewy body disease,
Okay.
yeah.
And you said that caused
It's deterioration of the body, the nerve, and the mind.
Okay.
Let's put it this way. One doctor told me it's a little, well, osteoporosis every woman has, you know. Even the men have it. And what maybe made her fall was Parkinson's
Okay.
and dementia.
Okay.
And everything was a little different, you know. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then you
You
started
know.
doing some of the cooking. And
Yeah. Well, and Lillian was Finnish, you know, so she didn't know any of these German dishes when she got here, but she seen them once and she made them just as good as my mother.
So
Well, I have to tell you, when I left this girlfriend up here, start going with Lillian, my mother said, well, this is your school teacher. Die kennen nicht kochen, you know. She's not German.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think about 6-7 months later, I brought her, I said, you're going to stay here over the weekend. And Mom said, that's okay. So we had a grocery store at that time. And Mom went up to the grocery store. And Lillian said, I'll do the cooking. And then Mom said, you don't have to. No. She said, I'll do the cooking. What are you going to make? So she's going to make Swiss steak. And then she made Swiss steak and apple pie. And then when we came home, we ate supper. And then pretty soon my mother looks over and said, Die kann kochen.
So, what was the best German dish that Lillian learned how to prepare? What was the best thing that Lillian could cook?
Well, she could make everything. I don't care what you want to. Yeah.
Anything and everything?
The only thing she didn't make is strudel.
Really?
Yeah.
Did she just not like to do that? Or
I don't know. She never tried.
never tried?
Yeah. Because we were all invited to my cousins all the time. There's where we'd get strudel. So why make them at home?
Why make it if you could get
Yeah.
it somewhere else?
Yeah. Yeah, she was a real good cook, and she could make something out of nothing. I always said, you know. You know, she was at school. She'd come home 5 o'clock. Why? She'd have supper ready for me.
Sounds like a hard worker.
Yeah, she wasn't afraid of working. You know, when you had the grocery store, we had a chance to sell the grocery store. A man in Alfred had a store and it burned down, so he came over and bought our equipment,
Okay.
moved to Wishick. And when he walked out, he said, oh, I forgot something. You got to trade in, I think it's 5 Guernsey cows and a horse and a heifer. Well, we lived on the farm over here. So, okay, but you know, we had to start milking. And here she's a school teacher. So I said, well, can you milk? Oh, yeah, she can milk. So pretty soon here we were on a dairy then. We had a dairy until 44.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
She definitely knew how to work.
Yeah. But she wasn't afraid to work.
Did she really enjoy teaching?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was in the end when she was just teaching slow readers.
Okay.
She taught the last 8 years at Medina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here. You've talked about butchering and making sausage. Did your parents ever have people come over to the house to help with that, or go someplace and have like a sausage making party?
No.
Or
We made everything at my grandparents' all the
Okay,
time.
so
Everything. Never made sausage at home. Grandpa was the sausage maker, so.
did you ever help with that?
No.
Never. Never
I
had
didn't
any-
even watch her butchering.
Really?
No.
How about politics? Were your parents involved in any politics when
No,
you were growing
my
up?
dad never. No, never.
Never.
No.
How did you get involved in politics?
Well, I started being a precinct committeeman, and I worked for Fred Wolf in the Chevrolet garage. That's where it really got started, and then one day when they had election, for governor, I had to drive the demonstrator Chevrolet with a sign on top, welfare for governor. So that's how I got started. And how I got in the legislature, that was never planned on it. We went to a meeting in Wishick. These two counties are together. Went to a meeting at Wishick, and they had Jack Dahl. He's a big rancher out here, and he was going to run for this position here because the guy that was here died. So then Fred Wolf came to me and said, the guys in there, they don't want Jack Dahl in there. And I suggested you. Well, I said, I have no idea, He said, well, I told him to nominate you. Oh, okay. Was nominated, got in.
Huh. What was it like?
Well, the first year was, Roland Meidinger told you keep your mouth shut and listened. And then the second year, and then the fourth year, see, the first year, it was all Republican mostly. The second year, the Democrats took over. The third year, the Republicans, and the fourth year, the Republicans were in. Then I got the chairmanship because we had the most Republican district in the state of North Dakota here.
Okay.
Yeah.
On your biography form, it said you were mayor of Gackle, is that right?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, how should I say that? Well, I had all the other jobs first of all, so. But Norman Martin was the drugstore man over here, and we wanted to get pavement into Gackle. Okay. And the guy that was mayor wouldn't accept it. So Martin ran against him and beat him. And then after 2 years, after we got the law passed and all the things ready for that, then Martin resigned because he didn't want it. And then I was appointed. See, I didn't run the first time. I was appointed 2 years. Okay. And then I didn't run the next term. But I had the write-ins. And then the third term, I didn't either. So I had all write-ins, yeah.
All right. Huh.
And then I was fire chief for 3 years. So I'm a life member. See, you're in for 3 years and go to the state convention, then you're a life member.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a life member.
How's that been?
Well, it was fun, but it's a lot of responsibility, but we were lucky. We had, Gackle always had a reputation. Nothing burned down that wasn't supposed to burn.
Really?
Yeah. We got every fire out, but the ones that were lit and supposed to burn, those we didn't get out.
How was it being the mayor? What was that like for you?
Gackle wasn't rough. It was good, yeah. Okay. Got to know a lot of people and it was a pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since you grew up in Gackle, what did Gackle look like back then? What types of businesses were here when you were growing up?
Well, when we first got here, I can remember we parked in the middle of the streets. And the first year that I can remember, we tied the horses on. They had these hitching poles or whatever you call them on Main Street. Yeah.
Like an old Western.
Yeah, yeah. Then later on, they start parking in the middle of the streets. Okay. Yeah. And then it started growing. Gackle always had a lot of business places.
Okay.
At one time, not then, but in between now and my time, we had 5 implement dealers. I was one of them. We haven't got any. We had 3 car dealers. I wasn't one of them. We had 3 garages. Well, we still have 2 or 3. That's the only thing. But we always had a dentist. We always had a doctor. And we had the hospital there for a number of years, very good hospital. But we had all Canadian doctors. And they came broke, every one of them. In fact, the first guy came, the banker had to buy him a dinner here 3-4 years and made money, and the women wouldn't stay. The doctor never wanted to leave. But the women, once they got money, they had to go. In fact, the best doctor we had, 1952, he was doctor here. And when I was in the parade, we celebrated Jubilee, he hollered out, "Hi, Emil!" Here he came back to Gackle.
He came back
Yeah.
for the...
Yeah. And then, well, I seen him afterwards, and then he said, "I want to introduce you to my wife." And I said, "Well, I know your wife." "Oh, no, not that one." He said, "I left her." Because the morning when he left, I remember he came down to my garage, and he got tears in his eyes. He said, "I don't want to leave Gackle. I like you." But he said, "My wife wants to go, and that's all." So they went out to Bellevue, Washington. Okay, that's where he is now. And she had the same deal there a while, and she wanted to move again. So he let her go, and he got a different wife.
Had a problem with sitting still for too long.
Yeah.
So, was there a movie theater in Gackle when you were a kid?
There's still
Okay.
still a theater here,
Okay.
but it was on this side of the street where the senior center is. That's where the theater was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get to go to see it?
And then they used to have where the grocery store is now, that used to be a big department store and had a big basement down there. And that's where we had movies down there. We had roller skating down there, and then later on they made a bowling alley out of it. So that's all changed. Well, that building burned down then. That's one of them they didn't get out because that one was supposed to burn.
When was that one? What year was that?
I wasn't fire chief. Let's see. It must have been about 61 or 62, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about the pharmacy? Did it have like a soda fountain shop in it where you can get some ice cream or something like
Oh,
that?
yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. I can remember the first time the lollipops come out. You remember those?
Did you like
Yep, because it was on a stick, and chocolate, yeah.
I love lollipops.
Yeah, they had the smell. In fact, the last real soda fountain was in Streeter drugstore. That still smelled like a drugstore. They don't smell like that anymore.
No,
yeah.
they don't.
No, we had Carl Kaz was here for a long time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know who founded the town of Gackle?
Gackle.
Gackle.
No. Well, I shouldn't say that. No, I'm wrong. The Gackle was named after Gackle.
Okay.
Elhart. Trying to think of his first name now. Huh. That's one of those. See, my memory is good, but when it comes to names, I depended on Lillian all the time. This Elhart is the one that started it.
Okay.
He was the first one that built the first house in Gackle and got it started. And then Gackle was his brother-in-law.
Okay.
See, and that's how it started. They all were in Cullum. And then 7 miles south, right close to where Alma Schott's farm is out there.
Okay, yeah, been out there.
Okay, all right, just across the street, down a little ways, across the road, that's where Gackle was started.
Really?
Yeah, in that section there.
Okay.
And then they moved it in there. I think they had it about a year, and then they surveyed the railroad through here. Then everything was moved up here in 1904.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the town officially started then in 1904?
1904, yeah. We celebrated our 100th last year.
Yeah, we took pictures of your centennial signs. Let's see here. How many churches were in the town when you were growing up?
7 of us.
7? Do you remember what denominations they were?
Lutheran, Baptist, Church of God, Advent Church, Catholic Church. Who were the other 2? Well, there was 2 Finnish churches, but they were out in the country, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How many are there now?
They're all by halves now. The Lutheran Church is the biggest one now.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the Baptists, it's same as ours. Yeah. And then the Church of God and the Catholic Church are done.
Okay.
But when we had a family, every family had 6, 7 kids. Like the Schatz, they used to come. They had a bunch of them, see?
Not used to the
Now,
small families. That
yeah. Right now, in our church, we have absolutely no teenagers even.
Really?
The 2 girls that were in there graduated from high school, so we don't even have any teenagers anymore.
Oh my goodness. When you were growing up, were there, did town kids have different feelings toward farm kids when they would come into town?
No.
Or did all the kids just kids? And
Yeah, that's one thing, never, like someplace, like Streeter, they had fights on Saturday nights or something, although they did have, in the bars, they'd have fights. They used to have, Gackle was half Finnish and half German. The Germans lived over there, the Finns lived up in town here. So when I got married, I said to Lillian, Lillian is Finnish, and I said, well, Gackle had Finns and Germans, and they fought every Saturday night. Now you and I will start out now.
Bring the two together.
Yeah. See, I never knew Lillian before at all. Never even heard of her. But she had all the relatives, and her grandfather and mother are buried right out by Alma Schatz. There's a cemetery out there.
Yeah, we went up there.
Did you?
Yeah,
okay.
We went up there last 2 weeks ago.
Well, then my flowers are still there. I put there. Yeah.
Speaking of bars, how many bars were around when you were growing up?
But not more than 2. We never had more than 2. Yeah.
Okay. What types of cultural events like dances or stuff or things like that would go on in town?
They always had a lot of dance. I never danced until I met Lillian.
Okay.
Yeah, I never knew how to dance. I didn't even care for dancing, really.
Okay.
And if I wanted to be with her, I had to dance.
Sounds like somebody else I know.
Well, I went to Judd one time. I'll have to tell you this story. To dance, I got the first one, then I got the lunch dance, and I had to break up the Home Sweet Home. And you know how I solved that? After that, I told Lillian, now, you don't know most of these songs. I want Josephine. I want, now I can't remember. The best one I can't even remember. But I had 5 songs. If they play that one, that's my dance. You tell the guys.
She got you to dance by playing
Yeah,
your song.
and she had to come hither. Look, I don't know what it was. I said she flirted, and no, she couldn't. We went to a big doings in Las Vegas one time, car showing. Ford had a great big room rented with all these fish or whatever, swan and everything in for hors d'oeuvres. If I've ever been on one of those, all kinds of hors d'oeuvres and everything. In the next room, they had Artie Shaw playing. And Lillian says to me, I don't want to dance, but let's go in and listen to him. Okay, went in there. We got in there and they start playing, and you can't believe this. There was a guy on that side of the room, walked across and asked Lillian to dance. And he was from Lodi, California. I said, well, she had, you can't flirt that fast.
Yeah.
It's just something about it.
She catches people's eyes.
Yeah.
On a side note, being a Ford dad, running a Ford dealership for years and years and years, what's your favorite car? Your favorite vehicle?
What do you mean?
What do you love the best? What do you recommend as a favorite car? Best car?
Crown Victoria, Ford.
Ford Crown Victoria, huh?
I've got one over in the shed, got 100,000 miles on, and have done absolutely nothing to it yet. Tailpipe, you have to put tailpipes on, and tires.
Just regular tuning.
Yeah. But I've driven all cars. I've been lucky. I always had good cars. I never had any bad cars at all. You get a lemon once in a while.
Describe a typical Saturday night in your childhood. What was Saturday night like?
Always had a band in Gackle.
Okay.
Yeah, the city had a band. And sometimes they would have races, and I can remember when I was just a kid, they even had movies on Main Street. Yeah, against the wall. But they didn't last too long.
you say are some of the positive aspects of growing up in a small town?
Well, let's put it this way. The marshals were real tough in a small town. If you know what a black snake is, you know what a black snake is? That's that big, long whip, a heavy one.
Oh, okay, okay.
All right. That's the way the cop would carry it. And we had a fire bell that would ring at 8 o'clock at night. And then you better not be on the street. One day our neighbors, the Hummels, the girls were up and the cop chased them. And they couldn't make it in the house. They run by and got into the toilet. And it's lucky that a door opened from the inside. They put their feet against the door and he couldn't get in.
Oh my goodness.
But that's the way they operated.
Okay.
And you didn't have any trouble with the parents. They wouldn't come and complain.
How about a negative aspect of growing up in a small town? What was something that was kind of a downfall you thought?
Yeah, no, I never had any.
Never had any?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any of the characters in your town? Somebody that just stood out that was a funny man or a funny woman? Somebody who was known in your town when you were growing up?
No. The only one I remember that was funny is an old lady bootlegger.
Old lady bootlegger?
Yeah. She would make homemade brew. She lived in the edge of town here. And she had a house. And when the feds come in, she always wore those big dresses, you know. And she had a little opening. There wasn't a big cellar in there, but just a hole in the ground. And she would move her chair over there, they said, and she would sit within there, and she'd sit down. You can look any place in the house. She said, there's no liquor in this house. She didn't say there's no liquor in the basement. And they'd leave every time, and they knew she had liquor, but they never seen that little place. You know how I thought when they caught this guy in Iraq, he was in a little hole like that. That's the kind of hole she had.
She's creative.
Now, those days there was a lot of bootleggers. When I worked in the garage one day, a guy come in with a car, and he lived 2 miles south of town, and he says to me, it was just 5:30 in the evening, he said, give me a ride home. He said, and take this car back and get the oil changed. I need it in the morning. So, okay, I took it back. When I came back, Fred Wolf, this is the owner, the boss, he said, what are you driving that car for? I said, well, he wants the oil change. He said, you know, you'd be in jail tomorrow morning if they caught you. I said, why? He lifted up, and the back seat was out, and there were all gallons of alcohol in the back.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's what he wanted, get rid of. Have it in here in the garage. If they come out there, look, he's not out there.
It's in the garage.
And we had, a lot of times when we were kids, we got these straw piles, you know, and do somersaults down. One day we were out the edge of town here, and Walter Hummel took somersault, and all of a sudden he got up, and oh, did he hurt. What happened now? Start digging, and here was a bunch of alcohol dug in the straw pile. So then that night, we had told Walter's dad. We wouldn't tell my dad because he wouldn't do anything. Now they decided they were going to, his older brother and them going to go out this evening and get it. Well, a little after dark, they went out there. They were all gone. They just had them stored over that day, or maybe somebody chased them and hit them.
Oh my goodness.
They're all gone.
Huh.
So there was a lot of excitement.
What was the most stressful childhood experience that you lived through?
I didn't have any.
Didn't have
I had a good life.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
How about a scary moment? Was there ever any time during your childhood that you were scared of anything?
Well, no, but I did a lot of dreaming, and I still dream, with my dad and that bull deal. I still have some. I wake up sweating. I run, and that bull is just about ready to get me, you know. And that has stayed with me all the time.
Well, since you had such a happy childhood, can you pick out a happy memory? What would you label as one of your happiest memories?
When my dad agreed to pay for the car. Well, I had money, but, you know, when I got at that age, I was junior in high school.
Okay.
And my girlfriend lived out there, and how could I get out there? So one day I said to my dad, can't I have a car? Well, then this Bill Bender, he said he wanted $175 for that Model A. My dad said, that's too much. He said, you go to school. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to have a car. When I come home, the Model A sat in front of the cream station. Oh, then he said, you go to the bank, get your money, $135. He bought it for $135. So never forget the first car, see. But you know, we start driving when we were 8, 9 years old. When I car, yeah.
How about adventurous? Can you remember a time? What was the most adventurous thing you did during your childhood?
Well, let's see once. That's a little hard to remember. Some of the things I shouldn't have done. I stole the car one night that I shouldn't have. Twice in my life I stole my dad's car when we were kids because there was no theater here. There was a theater in Edgeley.
Okay.
So one night there was 8 of us. We started out. We had to go to Edgeley, and the show was there at 7 o'clock. We left. We couldn't leave before 6. We left here at 6. We got to Alma Schott's place. You turn down south a little further.
Yeah.
Then you had to turn west 2 miles, and then you went south again. And we had 8 guys in the car, and we were driving too fast. We got that corner, and I couldn't make that corner. But Reuben Roof was on this side. He grabbed the hold of the steering wheel and just pulled that car right over. But with that load, it didn't roll over. So we went to the theater, and we came back. A week later, they had a ball game at Napoleon. So, okay, we're all going to go again. Because my dad kept the car up in the garage. We had just bought a new 33 Chevrolet. And I had the key for the garage. So went and took that car out. But I didn't know in the meantime. One of these Millers, these good friends of mine, seen us go, and he went home and told my dad right away. So my dad knew I had the car. But anyway, we went to Napoleon. When we come halfway to the street, or we come across the hill about 60 miles an hour, and it's all horses on the road. Boy, and I'll tell you, we dodged through those horses. I could hear I don't know if you've ever driven when the fenders hit the tires. That's how it was turned. We never rolled. We never bent the fender. And from that place on till the Gackle, I said to myself and promised myself, I will never steal the car again. So I get home, put it in the garage, walk in the house. Can you believe the light went on? There stands my dad and my mother. And then he said, where's that key? You know, I expected a licking, and this hurt me more. I gave him the key, and I never drove for quite a while. In fact, I never got the car again. Then the next morning, my mother told me that you were lucky. I said, well, how did you find out? Then he told us. Edwin Miller came over here. It was still after 6. He said, your car just left West Town. So your mother said they went to a prayer meeting that night, and the preacher had a subject on raising children. And he said, maybe if you speak a good word to them, rather than give them a spanking, it'll do good. And boy, that sure helped me out.
So just by chance, it was the same.
But I mean, just giving them the key hurt me more than the licking.
Is there anything else about your childhood memories that you would like to add to the interview today?
No, like I say, I had a wonderful father and mother and a wonderful family. And I was proud of the way I run my life. I mean, I just thought I done a good job. And I had a good family, I had a good wife, and I had a good family.
Good. Why do you think it's important to record your life history?
I don't know. Why? Just wanted to do it.
Okay. That's a good reason to do it.
My children are adopted, both of them.
Okay.
We got Michael when he was, I think, a month old, and Gail we got when 3 days old.
We adopted my little brother when he was 2.
Uh-huh.
And my sister-in-law, his sister, was adopted when she was about 2 months.
And they're the most wonderful kids, right?
Can't love them like any
Yeah.
different than they.
Well, now, you know, I'm supposed to be on dialysis.
Mm-hmm.
I got these things in here already a year ago in March, but I'm not on yet. And when my son heard, you know, that I was supposed to go on dialysis, they decided if I didn't mind, they would move back if they needed help to take care of me. So
That was really
yes,
nice.
yeah. And my daughter lives in Jamestown. Works
So
in
they're
the,
really close.
she works in the Jamestown Hospital. Yeah.
So do you see your daughter a lot then?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice for you.
And my grandson, the one that one there, he's our favorite. He's a educational certificate.
Really?
We call him all the time. My daughter went to school in Bismarck and came home with him. We always call educational. So we raised him, see, and so he's close to us. And he went to school in the Brown Institute in Minneapolis, and he's with the TV station in. He goes out and does advertising like you do,
Oh,
you know.
cool.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. Sounds like you have a close family.
Yeah.
That's nice. Let's see. Are there any Are there any other thoughts or observations that you would like to add to the tape today?
Well, one thing that I regret, and I think most of them, is to say we're sorry. Maybe I'll get tears in my eyes, I don't know.
It's okay.
But you know, a lot of times, it was my fault, maybe a little jealousy or something, you know, that all it would take is, I'm sorry, wouldn't it? But we don't say it. We're too stubborn to say it. And I regret that with my parents, with my wife. And then my wife started a deal that she put up by the telephone that never say a bad word, the last word to anybody. Always say something good because that may be the last time you'll talk to them. And so after that, the last 25 years, I don't hang up the phone, but what I say, I love you or I miss you or something. And the kids do all the same too, yeah.
It's a good way to live. That's a good idea.
But you know, we're just too proud to say, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people, yeah. And lastly, is there anyone else that you would like to suggest for us to interview that you think would be interested in this project?
After you leave, I can tell you.
Hey, that works too. That works too. We're going to go ahead and, before we turn off the camera though, I want to take and get a shot of these pictures on the camera.
Can you get those that she's got on there too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, get that off the wall.
Okay. And we're going to unmic you. Well, actually, I'm going to leave you mic'd up. And what can you just tell Will, like, this one over here, start over here with this picture and just tell him when you're, like, why your wife painted it. Like, that was her first one, and then the story behind your grandson. So that one's on, it's on the...
Okay. Now this is one of the first ones she painted in Arizona, and that's really made in Arizona. And this one she painted for Travis Chapin, which is her grandson. Okay. And this one she painted for Eric Schaffer. His name is Eric Schaffer, and his little black dog. And they used to live right across the alley from us, and he'd walk up in the wintertime. And that one, he always wanted a horse. So she painted a horse, and the pheasant she painted for Michael, our son.
Okay. And the pheasant you said was one of the last ones that she
painted? Yeah, the last one she painted. Maybe come in here
This was a Ford dealership?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't look like it uptown here anymore.
Different now.
Mm-hmm. And now this is my son and his wife. You've seen her back there this morning. Mm-hmm.
And what's your son's name?
Michael.
Michael, and then his wife's name is?
Victoria.
Okay.
And then that's Michael. Those are all Michael's kids.
Up top, the 5 up top?
Yep.
Okay.
See, that was the oldest one there. Then that's Tony, that's Joey, that's Mikey. And then Tina, and then Nicholas.
Nicholas graduated in 98?
Yeah.
That's the class I graduated in.
He went to the St. John School down at St. Paul. It's a very famous school, and he was one of the 10 high ones.
Really?
Out of 1,000 people, yeah.
Oh, that's something to be very proud of.
Yeah, and then, see, that's my dad and my mother when they got married, and that's that bottom picture. We celebrated their 49th wedding anniversary, and he died 10 days later.
Are you serious?
And that's Lillian's mother that's up there. And this is my daughter,
And what's her name?
Gail and Chapin.
And is that her
Husband,
her
yes,
husband?
Bill. Mm-hmm.
Did your wife paint that, or?
Yeah, she painted that too.
That is really, really pretty.
And then, this is where when I joined the Seas and wanted to go out west, see where I wound up in the Peace Gardens. I was in the kitchen.
Where were you hoping to go? Out west? Out to like
Well,
Washington?
I wanted to, yeah, a mountain. See, in 36 I was out west. And then when I asked where I wanted to go, they said, finally went to the mountains. And there's no mountains there. There's hills there, so. And that's my only great-granddaughter.
Oh, and how old is she now?
Maybe 2 years. 2 years, yeah. 2 years old, yeah.
My little sister just had my parents' first grandchild. It's about in April 10th.
Now that's the famous picture you're taking right now. Did you see that one?
Which one? Oh.
All the presidents and their wives.
Oh my goodness.
I've got that down in the safe.
I was just looking at this up here with the Bush and Clinton. How did you?
Well, I got pictures of all of them. They all
Really?
send them, yeah. They all send them to me all the time.
Really?
I send them money, they should send me. See, but here, I've got this one down here, the original picture, and then we had to send it to Nixon, and then they signed it and sent it back. Then we send
Really?
it to the next guy and send it back.
And so they're all
signed,
Oh, my
original
goodness.
deal, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a treasure.
And that's some of my Ford pictures. That guy up there, Reuten, he congratulates me. He was a German. He was our president in the Case Company. That's when I won that trip to NASA.
Okay. And then this is the House of Representatives when you were serving in the legislature.
You see him?
This here. Do I see you? I don't know yet. I don't want to get in your way. So, let's see here. Where are you?
Right in front of you, isn't it? Should be right in here someplace. That might be me
Right
there.
there. That is really neat.
Now you can get this one behind you.
So is this is?
That's the town of Gackle.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. I'll show you the difference.
Oh my goodness.
That's my older pictures of Gackle.
Get the years on it, because that's 1930.
This is 1930.
And this is 1955.
Yeah. We took this off of the computer though.
Oh my goodness. You got it. And then 1979.
Yep.
Got that one.
Yeah, that's right. Oh. They even kept my flower that I had on. See, in that picture, these are these are our 50th anniversary.
Oh. How did you celebrate your 50th? What did you do for the 50th? How did you celebrate?
Well, we celebrated twice because we celebrated in Arizona and here at Jamestown. Yeah, the kids took us out.
So did your wife paint this one here too?
No, that one she bought for me.
Okay.
And then I always kept this one. I wanted her to paint that one, that little one.
Is this,
This was a coincident picture. A guy, a guy from, you got to look real close. A guy from Arizona called, said, I was at a junk dealer the other day, or a rummage sale. He said, I seen this picture. Now this is me working in Gackle, the filling station. And this is my best man in Gackle.
Okay.
Now look at those two guys in that picture. They look a little like, see?
Oh my goodness. Hat and everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my goodness. That is, and then like the pumps behind it and everything. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
and when I worked in the filling station, the pumps were like that and everything too. And then he took that off, put Schaffer up there, see?
Oh, that is too funny.
Yeah.
That is good. That's a good one. And then we talked about this one a little bit earlier, and it was the Sammy King. And then you said this was Lillian here?
Yes.
And then this is you?
Mm-hmm. And that's Sammy K up there. And you know, I had not, now that was taken about 1958, I think. And in 1960, I was in Oaks, North Dakota. He played there.
Really?
And during intermission, this one guy I knew asked me to come over to the house for a drink. And Sammy was standing there, so he went along, asked him along. We went in there, and then I told him, I said, I met you before. And he said, how did you meet you? I told him at that private club in St. Petersburg, or Madeira Beach. And he said, you mean Hazel there? That's the one there. He remembered Hazel. Hazel put on a private party for us that time, yeah. So he remembered. He didn't remember me, but he remembered the party. Yeah. And then that's my, where's my she isn't even up there. My choir person, she's gone. But that's what she handed out, see, to me. That one and that one there.
You got that?
She was a little poet. Everything she done, she wrote items on there. I can't see your picture there. Oh, I know. I put them away in the book. That's what I hired somebody.
Did you get all of his House of Representatives ones? Okay. I'm actually going to bring in...
I got one more place. Let's go out there.
Oh, my.
See? Now there's our wedding picture, and there's our 40th, and there's our 50th. This is one of her first ones, too.
Oh, right here? I'm going to go grab
But I think that she really isn't painting, that's some... But I mean, she started out and look at that basket, just perfect.
Yeah. No, and those are the flowers, aren't they? The ones I was telling you. I don't even know what they are, but we were at a baptism and they had these flowers. They look kind of like that. They're really pretty. Did you get the sign too? Okay. And I'm going to take digital pictures of this while you scan.
She coming?
Yep, I'm back.
sailest full verlangen, iemand ewig zu empfangen und vor seinem Thron zu stehen und vor seinem Thron zu stehen. Okay, now we'll play the other one she wanted. 1, 2. She always said this feels so far away. Now this is the one I played different sounds.
That one was soothing.
Then she would cry.
Yeah, I was just saying, you just brought tears to my eyes,
Yeah.
actually.
If I played it 3 different kinds, then she just loved it.